They pulled a black CEO off a plane thinking she didn't belong in first class. But 1 hour later, the truth came out. She wasn't just a passenger. She owned the company that funded the airline. And when she spoke, the whole world listened. The morning sun shined through the tall glass windows of the international airport, where travelers rushed in all directions carrying their dreams in heavy suitcases and light hearts. Among them walked a calm, confident black woman dressed in a sleek navy suit. Her name was Maya Henderson, the CEO of Henderson Global, a billion-dollar investment firm that had recently partnered with one of the biggest airlines in the world, the very same airline she was about to fly with today. She had been invited to attend a major board meeting overseas to finalize a $5 billion funding deal. But to her, she was simply another passenger ready to rest during the long flight. She handed her ticket to the gate agent, who smiled and said, "Welcome aboard, Miss Henderson. Enjoy your first-class seat." Maya nodded politely and entered the jet bridge, unaware that in a few minutes she would face the most humiliating moment of her life. Inside the aircraft, Maya placed her bag neatly under the seat and took her place in seat 1, a corner of quiet luxury. As she adjusted her seatbelt, she noticed the crew whispering nearby, their glances sharp, their tone uneasy. Soon one of them approached with a forced smile. "Ma'am, may I see your ticket again?" Maya handed it over without hesitation. The flight attendant frowned and said, "I'm sorry, but first class is for premium passengers only." Maya looked confused. She replied calmly, "I am a premium passenger. My ticket clearly says so." The attendant shook her head and muttered something under her breath before walking away to the captain. Soon, 2 uniformed security officers entered the cabin. They looked around until one pointed straight at Maya and said, "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to come with us." Maya blinked, unsure what was happening, but she stayed poised. She said, "I'm not sure there's any mistake. I'm simply sitting where I'm assigned." One officer replied, "We received a complaint that you're not authorized to be here. Please come quietly before we have to remove you." Maya's voice stayed steady, but her heart pounded. She could feel the stares of the other passengers, sharp, judgmental whispers echoing through the cabin. One man muttered "typical," while another snickered as she gathered her bag and stood tall, her eyes locked with the captain, who refused to meet her gaze. The cold air outside the terminal bit into Maya's skin as she stood beside the officers who had just pulled her off the plane. She kept her head high, but inside her heart trembled with disbelief. Flashes from phones and cameras surrounded her. A crowd had gathered, whispering and recording. Some passengers murmured she must have done something wrong. Others recognized her face from business magazines, but stayed silent, afraid to interfere. Maya spoke softly to the guard, "I need to call my lawyer." One of them replied, "Go ahead, ma'am, but please step aside for now." She took a deep breath and looked around, realizing that in a few minutes the world would see her not as a CEO, not as a leader, but as a spectacle. When she finally left the airport, her phone buzzed non-stop, dozens of missed calls and hundreds of messages. Her assistant Kara's voice came through the line, trembling with panic. "Maya, what happened? I just saw a video online. They're saying you were escorted off your own partner airline." Maya paused for a moment and answered in her calm tone, "Kara booked me a meeting with our legal team tomorrow morning. Also reach out to public relations. I want no statements released yet." Kara asked, "But the media already posted headlines. They say you refuse to leave first class." Maya closed her eyes, fighting the sting of anger. "Let them talk for now. We will respond when the time is right." By the time she reached her penthouse, the video had gone viral. Millions of views flooded every platform. The clip showed security dragging her bag behind her while she stood tall, her face composed, her silence speaking louder than any protest. Some comments praised her for remaining graceful. Others filled the screen with cruel laughter, mocking her race or gender. Her presence in first class, the airline issued a cold half apology, stating it was all a simple misunderstanding, that their staff were only following procedure. Maya sat on her balcony overlooking the city lights. She sipped water, her mind racing not with pain, but with plans. Her company, Henderson Global, held powerful ties in aviation, finance, and international trade. She knew what $5 billion could do to any airline, and now she was going to show them the cost of disrespect. At dawn, her phone rang again, this time from a major news network asking for an interview. But Maya refused. She preferred silence, the calm before the storm. She spent the day in quiet reflection, reading through financial reports and emails from investors. Some furious, other supportive. One message stood out from a board member of the airline, saying, "We hope this incident will not affect our partnership." Maya smiled, faintly, the irony almost amusing. "Not yet," she whispered to herself, "not yet, but soon." That night, she opened her laptop and replayed the viral clip again. She studied every second, the expressions of the crew, the tone of their voices, the faces of passengers who looked away when she was being escorted. It was not just humiliation, it was proof, it was truth captured forever. The next morning, she arrived at her office wearing the same Navy suit from the flight. Her assistant looked nervous, but Maya's eyes were focused like fire. "Today," she said, "we begin." The morning sun spilled through the wide glass walls of Henderson Global headquarters. As Maya entered the boardroom, every head turned toward her. She walked with quiet power, her heels echoing against the marble floor. Her assistant Kara followed, carrying files and contracts. The senior executives looked uneasy, whispering under their breath. Everyone had seen the viral video. Everyone knew the world was watching. Maya took her seat at the head of the long oak table and folded her hand. Her calm presence silenced the entire room. She spoke softly but firmly, "I do not want outrage, I want results." Her legal advisor, Mr. Lin, cleared his throat. "We can file a lawsuit for public humiliation and discrimination. We have all the evidence. The video is strong." Maya raised her hand, stopping him. "I am not interested in a lawsuit. I am interested in power, not pity." Lin blinked, unsure what she meant. She continued, "What the world saw was not an accident. It was a reflection of how they see people like me, people who build empires but are never seen as worthy to sit in first class." Her tone was steady, her gaze sharp. "We will respond not with words, but with control." Kara opened one of the folders, showing detailed charts and financial links between their firm and the airline. Maya leaned forward, reading every line, every figure, every clause. The airline's global expansion plan depended heavily on funding from Henderson Global. The total value was $5 billion. $5 billion. That gave Maya leverage far beyond any courtroom. She looked up at her team and said quietly, "Tell me if I withdraw our investment, what happens?" Lin replied instantly, "Their entire expansion collapses within weeks. They lose international routes, they lose investor confidence, and their stock will crash." Maya smiled slightly. "Good," she said, "that is the cost of ignorance." She stood and walked toward the giant window overlooking the skyline below. The city buzzed with ambition and greed. She thought of how many women like her had been doubted, dismissed, or disrespected, not because of their lack of ability, but because of the color of their skin. She clenched her fist lightly, not in anger, but in focus. "Tomorrow," she said, "schedule me a meeting with the airline's board of directors. I want to speak to them directly." Lin hesitated. "They might not agree." Maya looked at him with a steady calm. "They will once they realize who I am." As she left the boardroom, the employees in the hallway straightened their backs, whispering softly that their so looked like a storm wrapped in elegance. When she entered her office, she paused by a framed photo of her late mother, who had once cleaned offices for the same kind of companies Maya now owned. She whispered softly, "Mama, they tried to pull me off a plane, but they cannot pull me off my purpose." That evening, news channels continued spinning their stories, calling her the mystery passenger from first class. But Maya stayed silent. Again, her silence became the most powerful statement of all. Even investors began to sense something building beneath the calm. She drafted one email with a simple subject line: "Meeting request." Henderson Global and Air Continental, the airline's executive team, accepted immediately, unaware that by saying yes, they had invited the storm itself. The next morning, the city buzzed with noise, but inside the towering headquarters of Air Continental, the air was thick with tension. The executives had gathered in their marble boardroom, whispering about the mysterious meeting scheduled with Henderson Global. Some assumed it was about the viral video. Others thought it was routine business. One of them laughed, saying she's probably coming to smooth things over. They had no idea that Maya Henderson was walking through the building right that moment, surrounded by silence and purpose. Maya stepped out of the elevator, her presence commanding every glance, her dark suit sharp, her eyes unflinching. The receptionist stood quickly, stammering, "Good morning, Miss Henderson. The board is waiting for you." Maya gave a brief nod and entered the long corridor that led to the meeting room. Her heels echoed with the rhythm of control, each step stronger than the last. When she pushed open the heavy glass doors, the chatter stopped every man in the room, froze at the sight of her. It was the same woman from the viral video, the woman they had humiliated, and now she stood before them not as a passenger, but as the owner of their fate. "Gentlemen," she said, taking her seat at the head of the table, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me today." They exchanged uneasy glances. The chairman cleared his throat. "Miss Henderson, we want to apologize on behalf of our staff. The incident was unfortunate, but we hope it will not affect our partnership." Maya's lips curved slightly in a calm half-smile. She reached in her briefcase and pulled out a tablet, pressing play. The video of her removal began to play on the large screen, the room filled with the sound of her calm voice as security escorted her away and the laughter of passengers in the background. She let it play until the end before turning it off. She looked at the men around her and said, "Tell me, which of your employees filed that complaint that a woman like me did not belong in first class?" Silence filled the air. One executive finally muttered, "We are still investigating." Maya nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. She stood and walked to the window. Behind her, the skyline reflected in the glass. She spoke softly, but her voice carried across the room. "I built Henderson Global from nothing. I turned one small loan into an empire that now funds your entire international expansion. I do not tolerate disrespect, and I do not accept empty apologies." The chairman tried to respond. "Miss Henderson, please, we can issue a public statement. We can retrain our staff. This was an isolated mistake." Maya turned back to him, her eyes sharp like steel. "No," she said, "it was not a mistake. It was a message, and now I'm sending one back." She opened a folder, placed it on the table, and slid it toward him. He opened it, and froze. Inside was an official notice terminating the $5 billion funding agreement effective immediately. She said quietly, "Your airline no longer represents the values of Henderson Global." Gasps rippled through the room. One executive slammed his pen on the table. Another whispered, "This will destroy us." Maya looked around, each face, her tone calm, controlled, and final. When power is misused, it must be reminded where it truly belongs. And with that, she gathered her documents and walked out of the room, leaving silence so heavy it echoed like thunder after lightning. The men sat motionless, staring at the papers that sealed their fate. As Maya exited the building, reporters surrounded her, shouting questions, flashing cameras, asking for a statement. She paused, turned to them, and said only one sentence: "Respect should never depend on appearance." Then she entered her car. The door closed softly, and the storm rolled away. A moment Maya's car drove away from the glass tower. The tremor began inside the boardroom. Chaos erupted. The chairman's voice cracked, shouting for someone to call the investors. Another man shouted, "This cannot be real. She cannot do this." But deep down they all knew she could, and she already had. Within an hour, Henderson Global's official statement hit every financial network across the world. The headline blazed: "Henderson Global withdraws $5 billion investment from Air Continental due to ethical concerns." Phones rang endlessly. Panic spread through trading floors and investor chats. The airline stock began to nosedive, dropping faster with every passing minute. Journalists gathered outside the headquarters. Reporters shouted questions. Executives hid behind tinted windows and locked doors. Maya, meanwhile, sat in her office, watching the numbers fall on a giant digital screen, her team silent as they witnessed what real power looked like. She finally spoke softly. "Actions speak when words fail." Her assistant Kara entered, holding a stack of papers and a trembling voice. "Maya, every network is covering this. The entire country is talking about what you did. You have become the symbol of justice." The airline released another apology, this time with your name included. Maya looked at her and said, "Tell them I do not need their apology. Tell them I only need change." She turned to her PR director, who was pacing nervously. He asked, "Should we prepare for interviews or public appearances?" Maya shook her head. "I will not speak, yet I will let silence make them listen." The weight of her decision settled around the room, heavy yet liberating. Outside, the world watched the rise of a woman who refused to be disrespected and the fall of an empire built on arrogance. That night, while the city lights flickered like stars fallen to earth, Maya sat alone on her balcony, her phone buzzing. Non-stop messages from activist leaders and strangers flooded her inbox. People called her brave, others called her ruthless, but she did not care for titles. She cared for truth. As she gazed at the skyline, she whispered softly, "This is not revenge, this is balance." By morning, global media outlets from London to New York to Johannesburg ran the same story: the airline's collapse, continued as more investors pulled their money. Some called for government investigations, others demanded the resignation of top executives. One headline read, "The passenger they should have never touched." Inside Air Continental headquarters, fear replaced pride. Executives argued, shouting about bankruptcy, layoffs, and reputation damage. The chairman buried his face in his hands, realizing too late the cost of ignorance. An emergency meeting was called, but no solution came, only despair. Meanwhile, Maya's name trended across every platform. Millions of women, especially women of color, celebrated her courage, posting messages saying, "Thank you for showing us what power looks like." In her office, Maya held a meeting with her team. She said, "This is not just about money. This is about message. When one woman stands tall, she lifts 1,000 others." Kara nodded, tears in her eyes, the entire room filled with silent respect. Later that week, Maya received a letter delivered by hand from the same chairman who had doubted her. Was an offer of reconciliation, begging for a chance to restore partnership. Maya read it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She said quietly, "Send it back unopened." That evening, a news anchor announced live breaking news: Air Continental CEO resigns following financial collapse. Investors blame discrimination scandal. Maya's reflection appeared on the television screen. Behind the reporter, her calm face a symbol of dignity and fire. She turned off the TV and whispered, "They called me unfit to sit in first class, but I was born to fly higher than their imagination." She walked to her desk and opened a fresh folder labeled Renewal, a new project focused on creating her own airline, one built on respect, equality, and service for all. Her voice carried across the room as she said to her team, "This is how we rebuild, not by revenge, but by revolution." The city outside moved on, but history had changed. A single act of arrogance had awakened a force that could not be silenced. Days turned into weeks, and the story refused to fade. Headlines kept blazing across the world. Maya Henderson, the woman who stood against an empire. Social media overflowed with her name. People spoke of her strength, her calm, her quiet justice, while others still argued, saying she went too far. But Maya never replied. She did not need to. Her silence had already become a roar that reached every corner of the business world. The airline's downfall spread like wildfire. Its stocks continued to collapse. Billions vanished overnight. Employees who protested outside the headquarters, demanding answers. Investors pulled out their funds one by one, leaving the company hollow and trembling. Soon the government opened an inquiry into their practices and leadership. A reporter on live television said, "This is what happens when arrogance meets accountability." Inside Henderson, global things looked very different. Maya's company rose higher than ever. New partnerships approached her every day. Companies wanted to work with a leader who valued integrity over image. Her name became a symbol of progress and equality. Maya still remained humble. She refused dozens of interviews, choosing instead to let her work speak for her. One afternoon, her assistant Kara entered the office, smiling. "Maya, you have received an invitation from the World Business Forum. They want you to deliver the keynote speech." Maya looked out the window for a long moment, then nodded softly. "Tell them I will be there." The grand auditorium was filled with thousands of people. When Maya stepped on stage, applause thundered like a wave of power. She wore a simple white suit, her voice steady as she spoke. "I was removed from a plane not because I lacked success, but because I was not expected to belong. But belonging is not given, it is claimed and protected with dignity." The crowd sat in silence, hanging on every word. She continued, "Leadership is not about control. It is about courage and responsibility. If power is used to divide, then it is weakness. But if power is used to unite, then it becomes change." The hall erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. People stood on their feet cheering as she bowed slightly. Then she looked toward the audience and added one final line with a gentle smile. "For everyone watching, remember this: you define your worth, not the world. And if my story inspires you even a little, then share with others and help spread respect and courage." She turned to the camera, her eyes shining, and said softly, "For more stories of strength and justice, like and subscribe." The crowd cheered louder. The lights dimmed, and the woman who was once pulled off a plane now stood as a legend of grace and strength. Outside that same night, the city skyline glowed brighter than ever, each light a reflection of the truth she had proven to the world. Respect cannot be taken, it can only be lost by those who forget its value. Maya walked into the night, her silhouette against the stars, the wind carrying her whisper into the distance. Never again will silence bow to arrogance.